couple of weeks ago, we've covered the entire deck of our sailboat with solar panels.
On there.
Epic!
Yes!
Since then, we received so many questions about them, and so we did some testing.
This is for science. For science! I'm Mother Nature.
I mean, it is definitely hot.
For science.
Over the last couple of weeks, we shared with you so many experiments, from how hot they get, can you walk on them, how do we prevent leaks, are they grippy when you heel over, are they grippy when they're wet?
Ocean simulator activated. It's hard to walk at 30 degrees. I'd feel confident walking on the deck.
And most importantly, how far do we have to go just to break them?
3, 2, 1.
These are stronger than I thought.
What happens if we cut it in half? Oh. What else can we do?
It's still creating power.
And so today we are answering the last set of questions, which is probably the most important one. How much power can they produce, and how do they get affected by shade? So I hope you're excited, because this episode is packed with information. Shade, we all know, is an enemy of solar panels.
Yeah, and the deck of a sailboat is probably the worst place you can possibly install solar panels.
Wait, what?
Yeah, think about it.
Why?
Like, we don't have like a big open southern facing field at our disposal. That's the ideal place. That's why solar farms are all in big open fields with southern exposure, and the panels are all angled to the sun. That's ideal to maximize the output. We don't have that. We have incredibly limited real estate. And everything that's flat enough to put a solar cell on, we're planning to put a solar cell on. But the deck of the boat, at least between like the mast and the dodger, is a terrible place to put solar, because it's always going to have some shading. But it's the only space we have available, so it's all we got. And even if half those panels are in the shade, that's still better than no panels in the sun.
Yeah.
Right? We have another test rig. These panels have the exact same cells in them as everything up on deck. So everything from the cell up and the non-skid texture is all the same. We have them mounted down on a surface so that there's no air underneath them. And both of these panels are matching 55 watt panels, and we have them wired in series into one MPPT inside the boat. And we've shut everything else off so we can only see the power coming in from these. So we can explain a little bit more about what's going on inside of these panels, because they're very similar to what's on deck with similar structure internally.
It's 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's pretty hot.
Yeah.
It's full sun, so we have to create the shade.
There's a cloud like right there, so
Oh, shit.
we'll see how this goes.
We have to do this experiment before the clouds get here.
So these 55 watt panels have 4 rows of cells, and I'm drawing a line in between each set of cells because I can see them, and I'm not sure anybody else can. And then there's another one here.
And then
So the head of the panel's up here. That's where the power comes out of the panel. And so generally speaking, every 2 strings of cells has a diode in between them. So a diode is basically like a one-way valve for electricity. And in a solar panel, they prevent the whole panel going down when just part of it is in shade. So if this panel had no diodes in it at all, covering one cell would basically knock out the entire panel. What we have now is probably the worst case scenario, because they're 2 very small panels. So the voltage that's coming out of these panels gets affected a lot more than on a bigger panel, where if we took out a string, the voltage would still be high enough for our charge controller to still work. On the panels on deck, we have even more diodes than we do in these 2 panels. By putting bypass diodes in each panel, it splits the panel up into little mini zones. That's one of the other reasons why we split our boat up into 17 little mini solar arrays, so that by shading one cell, if we had 10 panels running in series like you would on the roof of your house, if you covered one cell, it would bring down the whole set of panels. Whereas this only brings down the one panel, and if I did this, it only brings down these 2, but the other 30 panels on deck are all producing at full power. Unlike a stationary installation like a house, it's absolutely impossible to predict what panels are going to be in the shade when. We're assuming every panel is going to be in the shade at some point during the day. So we're trying to design the system in a way where that shade, as it moves, only knocks out maybe 1/3 to 50% of our solar, but doesn't knock out 80 or 100% of it.
Okay.
So because these are both in series, me covering one of these cells will knock this down pretty significantly, but it won't knock it out entirely. So I cover one, we go from 64 watts to 53, so 10 watts down. If I cover this one, it's gonna do the same thing. If I cover that one, and it's gonna drop, now we're 37. So
what
we're
about
just
here?
32.
What about here?
Now it's not gonna really matter how much we shade it because it's basically that panel doing all the work. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's the other good part about bypass diodes is like we've basically shaded 50% of a series and this one's still producing 50% of its rated power, almost like 80%.
Yeah. And then at the same time, I cover one cell here.
37 watts. So it's knocking out 50%. So it doesn't matter which 4 cells we cover on which panel, it's knocking out 2/3 of that power because it's got a pretty significant amount of shading on it. But that's the beauty of splitting it up into smaller systems is that this little mini system is similar to what's up on the boat, and it's not knocking out like the entire bow just because one cell is shaded. It's knocking out this small little section of this small little solar panel. So not every flexible panel out there is built this way. These ones are built with incredibly shade tolerant cells. So at the cell level, they're very highly shade tolerant. A lot of panels you get on Amazon or some of the cheaper like fold out portable panels maybe have one diode in between each panel, but not inside of each panel. So that's why these are so shade tolerant compared to a lot of other things on the market, but it does mean they're more complicated to produce and more expensive to produce. We've spent just as long templating as we've spent designing which panels are going to get series together, how many diodes we're going to put in them, and how those are going to get linked to the MPPTs so that we can at least maximize the output by minimizing the effect of shade on the panels. Does that kind of make sense?
Right. But I think designing that to be as efficient as possible is what took the most amount of time between Kim, Sarah, and us, because installing the panel themselves is easy. Everything is already templated, everything is already printed, everything is already set to the specific measurements, and is just installing. Mm-hmm. But it's all the design work and the efficiency calculation, and that is what took a very long time.
And that layout and those string organizations and the diode layouts all custom spec for this project.
Yeah.
It's something that lvanThe can do is basically spec what they want and then have the factory make it. So we have gone overkill on everything to try to maximize everything because sailboat decks are a terrible place to put solar panels.
And it's inevitable. We're going to have sails up. We're going to have lines on things. Some sections are going to be in the shade. But yeah, like Dan said, it's better that some sections are in the shade and the parts that are not are still producing power than just not putting anything up there because it's not as efficient.
Yeah. And to make things even worse, the boat can spin 360 degrees and heel 25 degrees to each side. So like it's absolutely impossible to try to predict where the shadows are going to be because at some point every part of the boat deck will be in shade.
And at some point every part of the boat deck is going to be in the sun.
Yeah, exactly. So so on deck right now we have almost exactly 1.5 kilowatts of solar. We're not expecting to ever see that. We're expecting on average over the course of the day, probably between 40 and 50% of that to have some shading on it throughout the day. But because that shading shifts, we're going to be able to still charge it at 100%. 50% of our panels will still be able to charge at 100%.
It's going to work 100% at 50% of the time.
10% of the time. They're going to work 100% of the time. Also, the specific cells, those Maxion Gen 3 cells that we're using, are exceptional in shade on either side compared to your average commercial cell because those are meant to be out in the big open field. So they actually produce even more power when they're in the shade than your standard commercial solar cell. It's about as maxed out shade tolerant as you could possibly design a solar system on a sailboat deck that's going to always have shade on it at some point during the day. Can we spend the rest of the day hanging out in the shade? I don't want to go back to the sun.
Can we go inside?
Yeah,
is.
There's aircon inside because
Yes.
we're running aircon today.
With the window open. Haha, baby, we're not wasting nothing.
Actually, guys, before we head inside, I want to quickly talk about the paid partner of this week's video, BetterHelp. So I think therapy is a great way to get things off your chest, but not just that. I also think it's a really good way to learn about your inner self and to learn about some emotions that you maybe don't understand yet. It's not just for people that feel depressed or feel anxiety. It's just an overall good tool to have. And BetterHelp is an online platform that makes starting therapy incredibly easy. To sign up, you first answer a few questions, and then from there, BetterHelp matches you with one of their many therapists on their platform, and then you can start chatting with them via text or phone call or video call, whichever way you prefer, and also at any time and anywhere that is convenient for you. And the best part is, if you're not happy with the therapist that you're matched with, it is super easy to switch at no additional cost. So if you've been thinking about starting therapy and you want to give BetterHelp a try, you can head over to betterhelp.com/SelingUma, and you can use the code SelingUma to save 10% off your first month. So on that note, let's go inside for the next question.
So the next topic we're going to cover has to do with safety, which sort of has to do with wiring and the layout of all this stuff. Some of you guys had concerns about how we're preventing all of this from turning into a big electrical fire. So from the very beginning, we knew we were going to be covering the deck in solar. And so we've also left everything open on the cabin top. So once the wires came down through, we were able to run all of those back to the MPPTs in a nice, clean, orderly fashion before covering all this with ceiling panels. But because there's already cork here and we have these little clips and the ceiling panels, we don't want to lose too much headspace. All of these wires had to be pretty much flush to the insulation. We couldn't have those bumping out at all. We couldn't use like the regular wire ties. So we had to 3D print some of the little custom brackets so we could keep those wires nice and flat. So they're coming through the deck here, over there. We're running two panels together in series. And then each of those sets of panels is running back along the cabin top. This nice little raceway. And these ones are coming in here and they're all going back. And again, all of this is going to be covered with a ceiling panel. And then they're popping down behind here to our MPPTs. It's going to make tracing faults, or if someday something gets damaged or if we have to replace a panel, super easy, because we can just pop those ceiling panels off. We can follow exactly what wire needs to go where and fix it, sort it, solve it, troubleshoot it, however we need to. All of these wires are oversized because we wanted the absolute minimum amount of voltage drop possible, but it also means that they can take way more amperage than they're going to be running. When we measured earlier the amperage coming in from our largest panel, it was right at 5.5 amps, and these are 4mm cable. So they're capable of carrying like 20 amps or something like that. So they are super big. All right, so all of those solar panels are wired into the top of this bus. These are all fuse holders, which are definitely redundant, but we like them because it also means we have easy access to disconnect and shut off any set of panel we want by just popping that fuse out. There's not really a reason to have a fuse there, but there's also not a negative to having a fuse there. And so since we wanted the shutoffs there anyway, we put the fuses in anyway. So all of the inputs from all the panels are fused. I don't predict any of those ever going bad. We'd have to like short out a wire when we're installing it or something, or I don't know. So they're fused and then they get split off and they come into the back of the MPPT board. Something we didn't talk about, two things we didn't talk about these MPPTs when we did the install video. One, they all have a fuse inside of them. They have a 10 amp fuse and they are rated for 8 amp capacity. So they are fused inside, which means if that fuse ever blows, we just have to like pop this MPPT off, unscrew the cover, replace the fuse. It's just like a normal blade fuse, but it's a bit special because it's rated for the 58, 60 volts that these things put out. So it's not your average like 12 volt blade fuse you get it for your car. The second thing we didn't really cover in the initial video of these are these MPPT charge controllers are step up charge controllers. So the voltage coming in from the panels, somewhere between 25 and 40 volts, depending on which panel's which, and how we've sistered them together in series. And then these are taking that lower voltage and stepping it up to the 56.8 volts we need to charge our battery bank. So the power coming in is also on a big 4 mil cable, and then because it's a lower voltage, and then when the MPPT steps it up, the cable size can go down because it's higher voltage, so it's less amperage. I know, hope I'm not losing you guys. So all of those cables then come out the back where they are bust, and then the cables get bigger and bigger and bigger. Everything on the back of this board is now 48 volt, so the cables can be relatively small because the amperage is hilariously small. If there's 4 amps coming in here, there's probably like 1 amp or 2 amps coming through these smaller cables. And then they get bust into larger, and they get bust into larger, and leaving this board going out to our battery bank is just a big positive and a big negative, taking all of this power and putting it into our Lynx bus bar. They're also going through a contactor so that if for some reason the BMSs on our 48 volt side don't want to accept a charge for some reason, if they see some fault and they want to turn off any input power, the BMSs can actually open this contactor and kill all the power coming in from the solar. And then where all of this solar goes into the Lynx bus, it's also fused again, so that power coming back through from our battery bank, if it gets above, I think it's only a 40 amp fuse because all of this is 48 volts, so the amperage is very low. And all of these cables can actually probably take 40 amps before anything bad happened. One or two of you with a very keen eye caught that these breakers are actually only officially rated for AC current. The reason we chose these is because they are 2-pole single width breakers, and there's only one other company that makes them that is rated for DC, but we currently can't find anybody who can sell them to us. So for now, these are mostly acting as a placeholder until we do get the official ones that are rated for DC. But also, we've done our research, we've talked to our experts, we've talked to Schneider, and although officially they're not rated for DC, they'll still trip if the DC current gets above their rated amperage here. Maybe if they tripped 1,000 times, that might cause an issue. But because all of this is fused on both sides anyway, these breakers are mainly right now just acting as shutoff switches for each zone. And if they happen to help with fault protection, great, but they're not actually needed because we've got fuses coming in from the solar, fuses in the MPPT, and a fuse where it connects to our bus bar. So at some point we'll be replacing these with the proper DC rated ones. But if anybody has a contact at ABB, let us know, because they're the ones that make the official version, and we've had zero luck accessing them.
Do you want to talk about our little diagram here?
Also, for all of those of you concerned, bonus question, this isn't the final diagram of our solar layout. This is the painter tape Sharpie schematic that we put on here while we were building this board, just so that we could reference which one's going to be which for wiring. But the arch layout isn't finalized yet, so we haven't done our official plate yet. But this will change, we promise. So we basically have physical safety, practical, electrical, digital, all built into the system. So it's got safety built into its backbone throughout the entire thing. Fingers crossed, we won't have any issues.
So the next topic is mostly related to redundancy in terms of what happens if panels go bad.
Redundancy kind of feels like its own topic, but I think it's sort of built into like the core of the whole design. It's adding extra diode to prevent the power coming down from shading. That kind of builds redundancy into the system. It's making a bunch of smaller panels rather than a bunch of large ones. So if one panel ever gets broken or fails, gets damaged, we can just print a new one and have it shipped out. None of them are very big, and they're very light, so shipping would actually be pretty inexpensive.
And because they're smaller panels, while we're waiting for that panel to be shipped, if one gets damaged, we're not losing on so many other panels. We can still power our boat.
Yeah, if we start relying on the whole system to power a boat and we lost 50% of the system, that would be a pretty significant degradation of our lifestyle. But because we have 17 little mini solar systems, yeah, if a panel gets damaged, or if an MPPT blows a fuse, or if the software programming goes down in one of them, like we're only losing 5% of the entire system. We wouldn't really even notice until more and more started going down. So I think that's basically the core principle of the entire system is redundancy.
Yeah.
And having a ton of multiple little systems instead of one or two really big ones is basically the solution to that.
Yeah. And also, in terms of redundancy, we're going to have the solar panels on deck and on a Dodger, and we're also working on solar panels on the Arch, which we haven't covered yet, but it's an entire different design and a whole different system. So we'll get into that later. But that's also another redundant and separate system. And on top of that, remember, we do have regen. So like if all of our solar stops working and we're sailing, we can still power our batteries with the motors. So that's another level of redundancy that we always try to have.
And if we lose all of it, we still have a sailboat, which requires wind, tiller steering, and a wind vane and a compass and a sextant and paper charts. So like the redundancy of this whole rebuild is based off of compartmentalizing and segmenting capabilities, and all of them lead back to we actually require 0 power to move the boat.
Yeah.
And I think that'll probably be a fun video to make someday. It's just like turning off all of our battery banks and solar and just going out for a sail. Because it's a sailboat. It's completely analog at its core. So all of the electrical systems we're installing are lifestyle improvements and capability improvements, not safety features. I like the fact that all of the panels that have solar cells in them, we didn't modify any of them. So we have that CAD file. So we could send it to any solar manufacturer and say, cut this panel for us, put the connectors in this place, and they could just do it. And because they're all little mini systems, we could swap any of these 2 panels out for any other panel and wire it into the same MPPT, and it would work the same, even if it's not made by the same manufacturer. And maybe in a couple of years, 10 years, 15, 20 years, there's going to be better technology, more efficiency cells, something else, and we can just reprint a new set and put them on the boat.
Yeah.
Because all the hard work is done. And with that, I think we've been running the aircon long enough that we've depleted our batteries long enough that we can finally fire up these panels and see how much electricity they produce.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm keeping my expectations low because there is shade on deck. There's 1.5 kilowatts installed. It's a 900 watt per meter square day. So that's like around 1.2 kilowatts of potential power we could be producing if every panel was in the sun and facing the sun.
Which is definitely
not the case. So like, I want to see 1.2 kilowatts. I know we're not gonna, but it's going to be exciting to see how much they produce.
Okay, I hope they work.
Yeah.
I hope it doesn't stay at like 32.
All right.
Okay.
I think it's time for our final smoke test.
Let's go.
These are all on. That's on. That's on. Bow. Ooh, fancy lights. Zone 2. Ooh, fancy light. Slow blink is good. Slow blink means that they're producing more than 50% of their rated capacity. So these 2 are above 4 amps right now. 13 and 14 AB. Yeah, those are the 2 sunny side of the bow panels. 15 and 17 are the shady side of the bow panel. So they're producing less than 50% right now. 16, yeah, that's a sunny side panel as well. And then, yeah, cool. And then these are all Dodger panels. And then these are the 2 on deck underneath the boom panel. So they're going to be shaded as well. Nice. How much power are we making? The other cool part is the way we've designed it. None of the sets of panels coming into these individual charge controllers are going to max them out. They're all going to be around 50% capacity. So these aren't going to be running full tilt. And also the voltage coming in is relatively high. And it only has to step it up a little bit. So they are going to be getting warm, but they're not going to be getting as warm as they could if we were bringing in a really low voltage and really high amperage, and it was having to step that up. They'd be working harder, so they'd be creating more heat. So these will probably get warm, but I guess we'll see. Sweet, 600 watts. Look at that.
That's not a lot.
Well, half the deck's in shade. It's about half of what we could potentially be making if all of the solar panels were full sun exposure. I expected about 50% capacity at any given time, and also the boom's still mounted on deck. So if we push the boom over to the side and swap out the weird MPPT, we could probably get that up a bit.
So 600 watts, huh?
Let me go move the boom over and see what happens. You know what's still shading our freaking boat? Our neighbor's mast. This big old shadow. From that guy. Ah! It's knocking out this whole solar system right here. Check this out. The sun's not technically even over the horizon yet. And we're making 5 watts of solar. At 21. At 6:20 in the morning. With the sun looking like that. All right, so let's talk about how much power we've been producing. Over the course of the week, we've been draining our batteries in various ways, running the air cons, maxing them out, knowing that the solar's never really going to compensate for 2 inefficient air conditioners running, but it was a good way to sort of drain the batteries down, charge them up, drain them down, charge them up, and just see how much solar we produce. Throughout the week, it wasn't perfect conditions. We saw up to 900 watts per meter squared solar radiation, so not the full 1,000 watts that they're lab tested for. So we're never expecting to see like a full peak output from our panels. And also some of the days were a little cloudy. You know, sometimes our neighbor's mast was shading, sometimes our mast was shading. It wasn't perfect testing conditions, but it was real world testing conditions because things are variable and you don't always get full sunny days. So the first day that we drained our batteries, we didn't turn the air cons on until around 11. And that day we put in 5.3 kilowatt hours from solar. And then throughout the week, generally we saw between 7.1, 7.6 kilowatt hours. And then on the somewhat cloudy day, we saw 6.3 kilowatt hours. So that's pretty good. We have, again, 1.5 kilowatts of solar installed on deck. And if the day only had 900 watts per meter squared radiation, then we'd only expect to see about 1.2 kilowatt peak. But since, you know, half the deck is sort of always in the shade, around 50% was pretty expected. We saw between 600 watts and maybe 700 or 800 watts coming in on average throughout the day. At one point, we did see a peak of 1.2 kilowatts, which is pretty sweet. It was right when like the mast was aligned just exactly with one of our dummy panels. Basically every panel on deck was in the sun. So they are producing at their rated capacity, which is really sweet to see. This is only about half the solar we're planning to install. So the fact that we're able to get around 7.5 kilowatt hours in a day is really good, especially considering the other half of the solar is going to be less in the shade than this. So we're expecting somewhere between 14 to 20 kilowatt hours of solar in the day on a nice sunny day in the summer, which is absolutely insane. It was also really cool to see that like even when the sun was, you know, half above the horizon, our solar system was able to turn on. And by the time the sun was fully above the horizon, we were compensating for the 20 watts of load that our boat draws just at rest. So overall, I think we're really happy with it. We're excited to get the rest of the solar installed. So it's really good to see that they're producing about what we expected them to produce, which is amazing. And it was really cool to do all the durability testing and non-skid testing and heat testing. It's definitely brought our confidence way up from where it was, which was already pretty high with the install. And it's also really cool to know that if a panel ever breaks, we can quite easily replace it. We're not expecting them to break. We're pretty nice on our boat. We don't wear shoes. We don't drop things from the top of the mast very often. So because these panels are mounted on a solid surface, we're expecting them to last quite a long time. The cells inside of them are commercial thin film cell. They could easily last 15, 20 years. However, it's a boat. Nothing on a boat lasts forever. You're supposed to replace your rig every 10 years, your mast every 25, your sails every 10,000 miles. I mean, things wear out on boats, but it's good to know that the hard work's done with all the templating. So if we ever do need to swap something out, we know we can just pop a new panel in at any time. So I think that covered all of, or most of the questions you guys had around the solar panel system. We're excited to finish the rest of the boat and get out sailing soon. So come back next week because we've got another fun on deck project in the works. So see you then. Cheers.